Jordan trying to shake off Starks. Oh, what a move.
LeBron James with no regard for human life.
Final seconds. Bryant for the win. Iverson against Gill. The crowd on its feet. Allen for the win.
Welcome to the Sneaker History Podcast.
What is good, everybody? Welcome back to the show. My name is Nick Engvall. I've got a special guest with me today to talk some sneakers. I have been diving into the sneaker newsletter for the last 3-4 months, and this gentleman has been probably one of the bigger supporters on that. We've had some really great conversation through chats and DMs and whatnot over just some of the topics that I'm diving into. And I want to say that I had seen your profile, the sneaker profiler, right?
Yeah.
On Instagram before, but then once I started diving into your blog, I was like, oh man, I got to talk to this guy more. You know, like he's got some deep cuts on the blog. So Amado Rodriguez Jr., right? Am I saying that right?
Yep, that's it.
All
you
right.
got it.
All right. I don't want to mess it up. I want to make sure that I get it right. But thanks for coming on and chatting with me, and looking forward. We're already deep into conversation, people. So, you know, this is going to be a good one for you. But thanks for coming on. I guess give a little introduction as to who you are and what you do, and obviously your love for sneakers.
For sure. So, first, thanks for having me, Nick. I appreciate it. You know, I've been following sneaker history for a while. That's my thing. That's, you know, what I love about it is that it's not just about the guy who wore the shoe that made it what I guess made it valuable or brought value to it, but that you guys also talk about ancillary things that were happening around, you know, that shoe dropping or that shoe first making its way onto an athlete's foot. I love that stuff. Anybody who's read the blog knows that. I write a blog, the official Encyclopedia Sneakérica, for anybody who is wondering what the idea when I started writing a blog, I always knew I was going to write about history. So a type of history that's covered on Sneaker History and some other folks that I noticed. But I felt like that part of things was missing. So I said, well, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to create something along the lines of the Encyclopedia Britannica. There goes the name. That's, you know, that'll be the focus. In the beginning, I didn't intend to do unboxings. I ended up doing that. We get more into that later, but I had no intention of doing any unboxings. If you look at the early stuff, there is no unboxing content. It's all diving into, you know, true sneaker history, like the sneaker is the story kind of, you know, the big thing with Adidas and for sure, to some degree, Puma, right? The two Herzl companies, it's the shoe is the story.
Yeah.
And so that's the, I guess you could say, the heart and soul of the blog is that.
Yeah. And as I was saying before we started recording, I love how deep you get to go on these things. You know, like one thing that I always struggle with in what I've done for work and then kind of the side hustle. I mean, it's not really a hustle. I lose money on it, but like sneaker history has always just been my passion, right? Like I just want to talk about shoes, talk to people that are into shoes. And sometimes like we realize that like if we go too deep into things, like people don't really care about that stuff. Mm-hmm. And like a blog is better suited for that. But as like we're limited with time and energy, we're like everybody that listens knows sometimes we'll go a couple of weeks without a show and then there'll be more stuff on the site and vice versa. So it's like I'm always trying to juggle those things and balance, but I love how deep you go. And one of the things that like, you know, as you were mentioning the comic stuff that you did, like that's kind of the stuff that Mike and I and Rohit and Robbie, we love the worlds that are created around, you know, these things, because it's not necessarily that sneakers were in some of the stories that we're talking about, or like the guys just did an episode with talking about Wonder Man and talking about the J. Cole album. And like those things absolutely are right there next to sneaker conversations for All-Star Weekend, Super Bowl, etc. But like they don't necessarily always fit into the conversations we have or the blog post necessarily for us. So it's always fun to like see, like, you know, I think of it as like I'm always kind of the blessing and the curse of working in sneakers is like, I'm always keeping things and trying to make them more perfect than they need to be. So I'm practicing getting stuff out there more than I am not now. But then also, like, coming from more of a magazine background, I always think of it as like, you know, like you have a core story, but then you might have a side story that says, you know, so-and-so wore this shoe, or, you know, at this time, you know, the Nintendo Game Boy came out, or whatever that is. And like, I love your reference of Encyclopedia Britannica too, because that is like, you know, I mean, I think most people that listen to this show or know you or I are nerds enough to understand, like, if I could have a wall of encyclopedias that were just about sneakers and diving so far into, I'd be like, yeah, that's that. I've made it. You know, like, I don't need a wall of shoes. I need a wall of books on sneakers. So
yeah, for sure.
So yeah, I think it's really cool. And also, I didn't realize it until I hit you up on Substack. Your acronym for, what is it?
TOES.
Yeah, toes. Yeah, TOES. Yeah, that was
always
so great.
10 toes down in it. Yeah,
Yeah,
for sure.
exactly.
For
yeah,
sure.
man. So how did you get into sneakers?
So I think my story is very similar to a lot of people who got into sneakers, you know, when I was a little kid. So I'm old enough that there was no sneaker game or anything like that, you know, right when I was a kid. But there was a fascination with, right, there were certain brands. So, you know, I joined a elementary school basketball team, and everybody had Chuck Taylors. Everybody wore black Chuck Taylors. And I wanted a pair of black Chuck Taylors. Well, my mother and father are from Puerto Rico. They were born and mostly raised there. Ended up coming here in the 60s. And they weren't paying the money that Chuck Taylors cost back then. Well, even it's not like they're cheap now when you consider what the shoe is. The shoe hasn't changed in forever, and they still are expensive to me, you know, if you really think about it.
Yeah, totally.
But, you know, they weren't having it. So they bought me you'll remember these, the MBAs.
Oh, yeah.
They bought me the MBAs. So they, you know, from the lateral side, they looked right, but they didn't look right on the medial side where they had the big NBA symbol on it. So that stuck with me. That always stuck with me. When other NBA, right, because they ended up making that a brand then, right? And so they had a wannabe SL782, a wannabe Country, a wannabe, you know, you name it, from number of brands. It wasn't all Adidas or Converse. It was every brand. They had a wannabe version of that. Nike, I remember if you remember the upside down swoosh that they had on a shoe that looked kind of like mysteriously like the Cortez. So that probably, I would say, like, those moments made the desire. It was the desire, the coveting of the kids whose parents would spend that money, or, you know, to outfit their kids with those. That's probably where it started. But then where it really jumped off years later, my mother did finally buy me a pair of real Chuck Taylors. Made her angry because I immediately traded them for a friend's pair of Nike Cortez. I wouldn't do that today, just for reasons we can or don't need to get into. But I wouldn't do that today. But it was hilarious because it was a thing that we did back then. If one of your homeboys had a pair that you liked, you would trade them, right? And so I immediately had to trade them back. I had to get the Chucks back. But you know, that kind of, you know, it really was a cultural thing, not there was a line around the block or two lines around the block or whatever, but it was truly cultural. If you lived in a certain part of the city, if your parents were working class, or if they were, if they were rich suburbanites, you had different things available to you right at your disposal, depending on what the disposable cash and the background of your people were. So yeah, it truly was a culture thing. And I would say that marks it. And then, which, if you don't mind, this baby here.
Yeah.
So I ended up saving allowance so I could buy a friend's pair. So I was a B-boy, and he had a pair of the green with the blue form strip. And I think Noah ended up, when they did the Made in Japan collab, they ended up, and that's how, this one I had to jump all over. But they did a green with a blue form strip.
Yeah.
But it was a Clyde. I so wish I jumped on it when it came out, because that was the color of the suede that I had.
Yep.
It was the first pair I bought with my money, was a pair of Puma suedes, green with the blue form strip. And that kind of set it off. Got into popping and waving. They liked white shoes to match their white gloves. So then that was then I had to find a pair of white shoes to buy. But that's kind of like the very beginning of me getting into sneakers. I really didn't, I wouldn't say I collected them, but it was a deep part of, you had to be fly, if you were a B-boy or if you were a waver or a popper, you had to look good. Everything had to be right. Everything had to be crispy. And so to me, that's the beginning of what would eventually become sneaker culture, what I always refer to as a community, is this thing of needing to look fly, needing to look dope.
Yep. Definitely, man. Definitely. It's so funny. It reminds me of a story when I was growing up. So you're trading your chucks away story. So at this time, my family was going through a lot. And so we were living with people from the church, and we lived in between, like not directly house to house, but like we lived in Oregon, and we were kind of in this like neighborhood where there's a little bit of space between the houses. We're kind of on the edge of like a small town. And like there was like one of the families down the street that all the kids had all the Jordans. So this is like the 3, the 4, the 5, 6, that era. And at that time, like I think I had a pair of Adidas Forums, but the only reason I got them is because they were at the Goodwill, and they were like all maroon, and they were a low top. Wow. And it was a shoe back then. Now I look at it and think, that's like the coolest shoe ever. I wish I still had it. Back then, like people were like, that's a weird shoe. Why is it all the same color?
Right.
So we had another mutual friend that I played Little League with down the other side of the street, who always had Nikes, but never had like the Jordans, right? And so like we kind of were like this tiered group of kids in this area. And I was kind of like, like I'm not trying to like sell myself as a victim in this, but it sounds weird as I'm saying it. But like, we didn't have real stuff. We didn't have like, everything we got was from Goodwill. We had a $30 budget for shoes every year, and you had to make them last.
Yeah.
But at that time, my mom came across, like, I must have been with her, but I don't remember buying it. We were at one of the thrift stores, and there was a yellow Jordan shirt that was like,
wow, I
don't even know what it was for, but it was like a real Nike Jordan shirt. Yeah. And I was like, okay, I'm going to get it, like, so it was like $8 at the time. I get this shirt, the trade thing. I'm thinking like, okay, like this is cool, but like, I don't like yellow to begin with. It's just not my thing.
Uh-huh.
So I like go to the kid with the Jordans, and I'm thinking like, what can I get for the shirt? Like you got the Jordans that match the, like you could wear this with a shirt. And the other kid down the block, his name was Jason, and I can't remember what shoes he had, but he ended up getting some pair of Nikes that had yellow on them.
Okay.
And me being overly nice, let him borrow that t-shirt for the first day of school and never got it back. And like, I never thought of that like story until just now, because like, I forget how much of that bartering and trading we did when we were younger to like get those things. Cause like you know, like for me, there was like baseball cards and basketball cards too were always in those trades. Yeah. It was like, oh, you've got some, like unopened packs if you had some, or if you had like the Griffies, especially, I always wanted those, like, but so cool to like hear that again, because I feel like, and you probably could speak to this, like, our whole experience with sneakers has changed so much. But when we really step back and look at like how lucky we are to just have a bunch of shoes. And like I was saying before we started recording, just to be able to connect with somebody that has a similar experience and gets it and understands like this craziness that most people look at and think, it's so weird that you like sneakers that much. But it's like, no, like these are the things that we love about them. And it's always connected to those stories and the people that we meet along the way, you know?
For sure. No, absolutely. Yeah, I agree. And yeah, to be sure, things change over time, right? Like as you mature, right? As you change as a human being, things may get deeper than that. But man, back in the day, it was that simple. And I think that still does inform why, you mentioned, your gigantic collection, right? Why is it there? Because you had to draw them when you were a kid, right? Because that experience kind of informs you in a really right. These are deep cuts. I mean, what we're talking about is deep cuts. Why did I trade that? Why did I trade for this, for that, and the other thing? Because I had to have those MBAs back in the day. That's why, right?
Yep.
Or like your collection came out of you and your brother doing these drawings, right? So it's amazing how those things stay with you. And yeah, absolutely. I get it. They are tools, but they're beautiful tools. So is a hammer. I taught construction for 4.5 years, and not every hammer, they're not all the same, right? They're beautiful tools. They're super useful and they're beautiful tools. And sneakers, for some of the reasons we've already discussed, it's maybe a little bit deeper than that. But yeah, absolutely, I'm with you on what you're saying.
Yeah, man. So you showed off the Pumas. What else did you bring? What else do you want to talk about today?
Sure. So I think so as time went on, and I'll bring another one out from my childhood for sure, that only saw on television, and it was on a specific television show, Starsky and Hutch. The SL72, including the prototype, which because there was always this crazy thing about what's that outsole? That can't be an SL72. Well, then the PT came out, right? They finally released the PT, and we got to see that, right? That they are, in fact, it's the same shoe. It's one is a release, and one was passed around to get information. Yeah. And on that, I'll say I was in the military. I was in the Army, ran a lot. I was stationed in South Korea in the 2nd Infantry Division, and our first sergeant was a Ranger. We ran a lot. And so I developed a love for running while I was in the military. And so that's an young adult reason. SL72 is now special because of this pop culture reference from when I was a kid. And then, as a young adult, running became a thing. And then being able to pull my childhood into my adulthood that way, or vice versa. Sometimes I don't know which one it is, but they, it's kind of cool. And then I'll get into too, like, so this is one of the Wales Bonner from 2023 that it was overshadowed because the same year they came out with that silver long toe Samba. But she'd done the pack with the Olympic pack with Noah and Lada Volkova, and they each got to do 2. And I had those, and then she ended up doing these, and I'm like, come on. Yeah, you're talking about this blend of cultures, and then you drop this one on us. So I had to have these, and so they were way more important for me. And it gets back into that the shoe is the story kind of thing. What she was trying to do with these, and successfully, in my opinion, what she's done with every one of her drops was really cool. SL72. I mean, the outsole on these, and these are worn a lot. And you look at this outsole still. I love these shoes, and even going back to the Puma that Noah did, I love, that how much respect, similar to Wales Bonner, how much respect that Brendan has for these shoes, what they were originally for and what they were about. I get into Justin Puma. I get into debate. We nerd out about this, crack, Clyde basket, suede thing all the time. And I always point out for those out there who are who love Puma and talk about these shoes. This is a multi-purpose outsole. It's not made for basketball. I know it ended up being famous for basketball, but if you look at the trim trab and stuff like that of the same era, right? The original Gazelle, those were multi-purpose shoes. And I love, man, so there's so much I love about this shoe. I could nerd out for hours and hours about it. But those two, those are probably, formative for me.
Yeah.
Those two models I could buy 1 million of each silhouette. It would not be enough because there would be something about it that, so I really have to pull back the reins on myself a lot, especially I have a 2-year-old at home. So,
Yep.
But I also brought a newer release that is a vintage shoe. And, along that same, the 70s era, but, Osaga just, they relaunched, grandsons, descendants of the original founders.
Yeah.
They just relaunched the brand and they were kind enough to send me a pair to try out. But man, this cantilever outsole is crazy. When you look at that curvature on that, it's amazing. Like everything, look how that's curved.
Yeah.
Do you see that curve? And
Yeah.
you can feel that because of how, the technology that went into this. You can feel when you're walking on it. So I can only imagine what it's like to run in them. I'm never going to run in these, but I think you could.
Yeah.
That they, the things they were thinking about back then and successfully doing. Nike, the famous story with the LD 1000, it failed because this wedge thing that everybody was trying to perfect back then, it was too extreme. It was too aggressive, right? And professional athletes were getting injured in them. And Osaga figured out, because to me, that wedge, kind of looks the same, but they figured out how to make this work without marathon runners getting hurt. But this cantilever, I can vouch. That actually works. And the dual density foam, it's not fake. They don't paint these things. These are real dual density. Even the SL72, when you talk about that even. And I brought a more modern runner because I wanted to point out how this technology has, of course, it's improved, but it's technology that was invented in the 70s. Adidas with the dual density foam on these, right? This Rod Dixon, I've been fortunate enough that, he's become a sort of friend via the internet, as runners. He's talked to me. He'll go crazy talking about the development of the SL72. And I take full advantage, and every chance I get that I see these online, I try to touch base with them. But he can talk to you forever just about the development of this little foam piece, what he calls a sponge. Because he said originally it just looked like a sponge that they cut up, and it was refined over time. But this kind of stuff, that's amazing. It's a dual density 1972, which means it was being developed from 1970, 1971. And then even beyond that, with Rod Dixon was a big tester for the SL72, the PT version, which a lot of that ended up being of course, on the country and the SL76. But so, Osaga, I'm really happy that they came back. The Defist has done a really good job of doing a little history on them.
Yeah, I saw that.
Where you get a good feeling of what that company was about and why it's special that they came back. But those folks are amazing over there. They're really cool people. And the shoe it's brilliant. It's not ultra, it's not ultra boost. It's not boost. It's not anything like that. But the sensation from that cantilever outsole is similar. Like you can see how the development happened. And again, right, we're geeks. We'll nerd out about this stuff forever, but that stuff is
cool,
real.
Though.
It's real.
Yeah. And it's so cool too that we get to experience this stuff like a second or third time around in so many ways, right? Because like as much as like sometimes let's say social media is like the downfall of society, it's also like the best thing ever too at the same time, 'cause
I
it's
agree.
like, you wouldn't be able to find the deep cut stories, the people that were involved in so many of these things that, like, you know, I try not to put too much emphasis on any one particular person or brand doing it, because like a lot of what happens in sneakers even now, you know, we're all in the same space. We all have the same inputs, even though we're in different places in the world. We watch a lot of the same shows, or we see the same sports, or so, like, there's a lot of groupthink, and I don't mean that in a bad way, but like when you look back at the trajectory of like the sneaker culture world, whatever, there's so many moments of that where, like, you're talking about, like, trying to figure out that heel clip, right? Like trying to figure out, you know, the dual density foams, like all the people that were in different parts of the world looking and figuring out the same or very, very similar things, you know. And it's like, and sometimes obviously you get the stories and it's like, well, obviously somebody took that from somebody, but like the reality is, like, you would have found that together or apart because somebody put the shoe on, went for a run, and was like, we got to change this. And like, you come back and iterate and move on to the next. And I think that's such a underrated aspect of sneakers, and just like, and maybe that's a little too nerdy for like the average person, but like, so like, you know, like there's so many shoes that like I could look at and say, oh, that is connected to this other shoe, or, you know, that is like the precursor to this next shoe. And like a lot of companies, or, you know, the big companies do a pretty decent job of, like, you know, connecting those dots, or the consumers have connected the dots for the sneaker community over the years. But what is fascinating with like Osaga and like, you know, some of the other kind of brands, like the one that pops into my head is Red Ball Jets, like kind of the, you know, kind of like Pro Keds and Chuck Taylor, somewhere in between there, right? Obviously they looked around, they're all looking around and like, well, you got to have similar things here, but like the shoes look different, you know? And like when you see those brands come back, I'm always like, it's mixed feelings for me, because like I know how hard it is for these brands to survive. You know, how do they make sales at a high enough level to support the business when like Nike's going to spend billions of dollars on marketing, you know, like Adidas is going to spend billions of dollars on marketing. But also, like, it's just so cool to even get to learn those stories second, you know, like the second time around. And, you know, like for, like you said, the grandson running the comeback, let's say, that's got to be such a cool experience for him to say, like, my grandfather did this and now I'm getting to do it, and kind of carry on that legacy. Is like, not too many people get to have that experience. So like, it's so cool on like a human level to like see people get to have these experiences of like bringing something back. And I've seen a few of, like, a handful of those types of brands over the years where like you could look at something like the cantilever and you can say like, well, obviously this was done, you know, and maybe it didn't reach the mass market, but like the idea started, like you said, you know, 50 years ago. Right. It's just such an interesting aspect of like, you know, sneakers that I don't think that like, I don't think there's too many other things that like have the depth of that, you know, like we can look we can maybe look at denim and look at, you know, like Levi's doing copper rivets or something and say like, well, there's a clear point here where that changed everyone else's approach to this. But it's so interesting because it feels like with sneakers, and maybe this is why it's just endless interesting to me, it feels like you can go and you could probably roll the dice and say, okay, we're going to go look at like 1978 today. And like you could go find a bunch of really interesting things about that era that connect to now, which is so cool. And cool that you brought those on to show off too. Like, I appreciate that.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, like I say, especially because of the thing with my love of running. So that's, you know, a little bit, that's, you know, a lot of my focus, and you can see it in the writing. You mentioned earlier with the blog. You know, I played basketball in my life, as I mentioned, but I don't hoop now. I haven't hooped for decades, but I understand, because of the running, I understand what I'm feeling on my feet, right? And what this thing is supposed to do. And then, you know, you dig a little bit, and some designers and engineers, they put stuff where you could actually see what's going on. I would say Jacques Chassaing and Marcus Thaler with the XL series, right? And tons of other shoes that we all take for granted. A lot of the technology, you can see it, right? Nike
Yeah.
did it with the bubble, as did Carhu in '75, right? So these brands, sometimes you can see it and sometimes you don't. I think that cantilever, unless there was a name for it, who would notice that they did this thing different on the outsole, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
You would just feel the sensation and go, wow, why does this shoe from 1976 feel so good, right? How is that possible that this feels so good underfoot? Compared to, just a few years earlier with this SL72. Spoiler alert for anyone who hasn't tried an SL72 on foot. It ain't comfortable. Not in 2026. I
Yeah.
just love the shoe, but yeah, that it's like a quantum leap when you put both shoes on side to side. In a couple of years, they got here, and it's
Yeah.
so interesting, and it's like you said, it's something that most of us, I would say the vast majority of us, even of those who'd like to nerd out about this stuff, we take it for granted. But I think if you're active in anything at all and you put something on and it's different, you hear it a lot more in reviews, right?
Yeah.
For newer shoes, especially basketball, you hear it a lot. But you don't hear it about these old shoes nearly enough or read about it nearly enough. And I love that stuff. I could get lost forever, which before I do, I also brought an example
Yeah.
of the good old Saucony Jazz 81. This, of course, is the 81 version they did, right? Where they tried to reproduce the feeling that you would have felt on when you put the original SL72. So it's this midsole, I think probably the top layer is maybe era correct. There's no way, as soft
Mm-hmm.
as this bottom was, I cannot believe that in 1981 they had it dialed in that well. But
Yeah.
this is another one, Rod Dixon, who did the SL72 testing. When he went over to Saucony, this is one of the first things that he worked on with them. That he gave a lot of feedback
Yeah.
because they were way behind Adidas until this, and this really put Saucony in a forward, and upward trajectory. This one that Frank Cook did, I especially love that he connected it to his childhood, right? Something that we can all relate to with the insole, and this colorway that what's it going to match? What are you going to wear with this thing? Which was a point of his, his childhood story. The fact that, he gave the love to 1981. And these, I don't know if you've tried the Jazz 81, but this is an incredible recovery shoe. If there are any runners that
All
are
right.
into your stuff. For a
Interesting,
recovery
yeah.
shoe, it's good enough firm with this top layer, and then it's got that squish on the bottom. It's such a good, and then
Yep.
the hidden heel clip, right? For people who think the Ultra Boost that love that heel clip, it was hidden before. It's in
Yep.
there though. It's
Yep.
in there though. But this, it's another one, and it just happens that when I was in the Army, the Saucony and New Balance were two of the only brands you could wear, right? Because they had to be made in the USA. And there were a few models that back in the day, Saucony actually did produce in the US, and they
Yeah.
ended up losing the contract because they refused to onshore all the stuff that they'd offshored to stay in business. That's an interesting story how New
That
Balance ended up the made in USA New Balance stuff, which is so coveted for good reason. They're amazing, right?
yeah.
The reason that is a business, a major revenue stream for New Balance is because they don't have competition. Saucony dropped out. And the
Yep.
other brand, I forget, it's SAS, I believe, is the acronym. But the other brand that does made in USA for the military, for sneakers, they're a tiny brand. If they lose the government contract, they'll be gone. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a sad story to kind of tell there. But the shoes, one of my homeboys, he's originally from Texas, but he moved to Wisconsin, and now he's in Chicago. He has a pair, And he said that they're amazing. Like, they're amazing on feet. And so, it's really cool though, these little stories. But yeah, so with Saucony, it's this connection I had to the model is because of the military, not maybe specifically the model itself, but certainly the brand. And then this pair special though, not because of what someone famous did in it, but I wore this pair to the day my daughter was born.
That's awesome, man.
And so I'm not a hoarder with sneakers, but this one will be forever. This is a forever pair for sure.
Definitely.
And then I guess, the other ones that I brought are, you were mentioning Beba in the 80s, 90s, how things changed. I did bring, you mentioned the Forum. This is a Rivalry.
Nice. Yep.
And this is specifically a Milwaukee pair, 414 days. So our postal code that a local shop did. That's so cool. He got the numbers etched in them.
Yeah, that is nice.
I love that little detail that he did. But, the shoe's incredible. But again, Jack Chissang, or Jacques Chissang with his technology, right? This right here, right? The heel, there's a piece in there, right?
Yeah.
That hooks onto this eyelet, and it actually cinches in to lock in your heel. Are you kidding me? I mean, this stuff that they were thinking of.
Yeah. Right.
The Ultra Boost, for crying out loud, 2015, right? It has the cage, right? This is where this stuff started. This is 1986, man. I mean, it's crazy that this guy, I respect him so much. That's why I mentioned him, my posts on Instagram. I mention him, ad nausea, certainly in stories that I write, because there's a lot of technology that goes back to this one guy, and he's too humble to take credit for it, apart from the book From Soul to Soul. So I got it, I'm making sure that I write about it all the time, because if you're not going to brag on yourself, I'll brag on you every chance I get. It's just, to me, it's amazing, like stuff like that, again, that we take for granted. Now we have socks and all this stuff that'll lock you in. And then we have, right, the exoskeletons that really started back in the 90s with EQT and other brands that were developing that stuff. Crazy that.
So a quick question. Do you think, so as you're talking about this, my first thought of the Ultra Boost when I saw it, well, I was wearing the Energy Boost before it came out. So I was working at Finish Line at that time. So I kind of knew this stuff was coming. Yeah. The blessing and the curse of working in the industry is like, you're like, what, like the next thing is like going to be the best thing. Right. And I think the Ultra Boost is a great shoe. One of my favorite shoes, to be honest, but like it definitely has so much, to your point. It has so much that is, and this is like good on them for doing it this way, but like it has so much history in the design aspect of it that you almost don't even hear about it. I don't even think people talked about it that much, like I'm sure some people did, but like one thing that's really interesting is like, I think of the EQT stuff because that was my first kind of like excitement for running shoes. Like I wasn't running, but that green on the EQT stuff when I was a kid was like, I don't know what it was, but I felt like it was like kid in a candy store. Like that was what I never got them until I was older, but like that was like a color that just like is like infrared is up there for me. Yeah. Volt people think about, but like it's not like it wasn't like poignant for me, but that green, I forget what they call it right now, but like that green on the EQTs is always like the first place my mind goes with Adidas running shoes. Yeah. And exactly what you said, like the cage around the Ultra Boost was like obviously directly from the EQT line when I saw it, but it's almost like it didn't really get put out there like that. Like people, I don't think really realized how connected that was to like the history of Adidas on the running side, which is really interesting.
Well, even when you think of like the max cushioning, right, was such a thing. Like it was, my God, it was invented in 2015. No, it wasn't. Again, if you go back to the SL72, that's where these, 1972, right around that time when Nike is going from Blue Ribbon Sports to Nike, it's becoming a thing unto itself. You got to mention Onitsuka Tiger, right?
Yeah. Yep.
That is the genesis of what we consider max cushion or comfy shoes. We didn't invent it in 2013, with the Energy Boost, or 2015 with the Ultra Boost, or any of those other shoes that Nike did, and we have a bunch of other brands that did that kind of thing. If you dig into the history of every one of those brands, that's been a thing with them. It may be something that a new team came up, or a new generation really stopped, to your point, talking about, but this stuff has always been a thing.
Yeah.
And I brought something. I was going to bring an EQT. I was actually going to bring an EQT, and I was going to bring from the 30th anniversary, because everyone was in the original colorway.
Yeah.
I love the race walk. And it's not a running shoe, and it's a crazy sport. So the design of that comes out before EQT, before Peter Moore and Rob went over to Adidas to remind them of what Adidas is, right? Before that happens, Sang had already designed the shoe. And in 1989, there's a shoe called the Race Walk. It's almost identical. Like, there are a few things that he put, like he went a little more crazier with technology that he added. The shoe itself is the same.
Yeah.
You look at the two shoes and it's the same. But that shoe, I ended up getting the 3 that released in a 30th anniversary with the Hannon, Commonwealth, or not Commonwealth, limited edition. And then, the regular consortium pair, I ended up getting all 3 of them because of that link that they are to the past. Just before, when Adidas kind of had lost its way, right? The Dasslers, they're passing away. Unfortunately, all of them passed away before their time, but they all pass away. And the company, the French that came in, they understood what Adidas was, but they didn't understand the mind, body, and spirit of the brand that made it what it is, right?
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
And so, this lone, and I always think of, he's this like kind of mad scientist, Jacques is still, he's trying to, and he's even said as much in interviews and certainly in his book, that what he was after was he wanted to tap into the spirit of Adi Dassler, and he wanted to recreate that. That was always his goal when designing shoes. So when you look at this, this exists, and the reason that all these cool, really revolutionary ideas pop up is because he was trying to, reproduce what he thought Adi Dassler might do,
Yeah.
That's so cool. And then when you bring up the Ultra Boost,
oh yeah, I saw
this
you
is
got
what I
those.
brought
I'm
instead
so
of
jealous.
this is what I brought instead of the EQT,
Yeah.
because this is everything, right? The ZX series to me is everything. Dual density foam. They're comfy. They were built for comfort. They have the heel clip that the Ultra Boost ended up using. What is it for? Exactly what it's for in the Ultra Boost, to correct how your foot strike is, whether you pronate or supinate. The plugs, these are real things. These aren't just painted on things. This is real. If you tear apart the shoe, these are real things that hook into the clip and work with this thing, right? And you already know the stripes. The stripes aren't just there to give structure here. This whole thing, the lace system cinches up and pulls the stripes to really give you a lot of lockdown in the midfoot. This shoe, there is so much of what we still do in shoes today that's from this 1989 shoe.
Yeah.
And really the entire ZX series from I think, the earlier ones, right? The earlier ones for sure, they were taking ideas that people who aren't nerds about shoes forgot about.
Yeah.
And brought them over and put them into the ZX world. But man, when they went into the thousands, torsion system, this plug, I always thought it is the cushioning. It's not the cushioning. There are 2 rubber ball rings, right, that are inside there. and this just holds them in there. And so when you think about what Ultra Boost is, it's these ETPU pellets, right? That are put together. That's 1980s. 1980s. Jacques had already thought about it and did a version of that, right? I think it's so cool. Like this shoe, a lot of what's done in running shoes today, they were figuring out in the 70s, with adidas and all of his contemporaries, right? Because I don't want to, I said I'm a big fan of the outsole stuff, so Puma and adidas, but they weren't the only ones. That's why I brought the Osaga, because there's a lot of stuff done with outsoles. Adidas and Adidas, for sure, they have a formula that has always worked for them because it's part of their philosophy with running that they haven't strayed from. This little heel thing that they do on the heel, you'll find it all the way. If you go all the way back to the 70s, you're going to see that. Like in the SL72, it's there. The super flat sole, right? There's a reason for that. It's part of their philosophy. The fact that they always use this, Continental and other, they have their own proprietary, but this stuff is really, it's hard, it's durable. There's a reason for that. It's part of the company philosophy. It's it's the bones of the company.
Yeah.
But all this other stuff that these guys took advantage and messed with, it's inspired by, the spirit of the company, but man, even this cushioning, right? And this is dual density cushioning even. The midsole is dual density. So on top of everything else, the torsion, it's dual density. We're still doing it today. We're still doing that today. The biggest, most successful shoes are still doing that. And the thing that I really liked about this one, I'm sorry, I'm completely nerding out.
No,
but the thing that I really love about this one is Jacques and Marcus, rest in peace, what they decided, they wanted to hide how the shoe is made. So, and I'm going to connect it because I brought a more modern shoe from the 2000s. That's why this stitch and turn, this rolling that's done, it's done, and it's done because they had the idea to do this kind of stuff way back, even like sealing suede, to do suede overlays instead of stitching it in. They had the idea way back, but nobody knew how to do it, and nobody was going to pay to develop that. There was no need. Stitching it on was working. So I really like that that Adidas allowed them to do this in 2008. And then, obviously this is the new release, but I love that they allowed them to implement a lot of the ideas that were shot down because of expense back then. Ideas of running shoes are in the mechanics of this shoe, right? Modern running shoes. But then because they did this beautiful stitch and turn, they the overlays that are done in modern running shoes, it looks like what a modern running shoe is. So it has the looks of it, right? The aesthetics of one, but then it also, the nuts and bolts of how it works are all, they all about this shoe informs, modern running shoes. This shoe is just, I am going to wear it. I don't care if this colored paint rubs off. I'm going to wear this thing the way I think Overkill and anyway, the team that worked on this, I know Jacques certainly said it. It's made to be wrinkled, right?
Yeah.
So wrinkles, because there's no way to stitch and turn. You can't do that construction without putting wrinkles in the leather. So you can see it in all these corners and stuff like that. You can see all the, the hard work of the people that made the shoe, really cool shoe. But, for Ultra Boost, you can everything about the Ultra Boost in EQT and the ZX series. And it's all Jacques Chasang. Like the Ultra Boost is, for its time, the most modern version. And I was happy when they did the ZX colorways of the Ultra Boost, because to me, even they should have marketed. I know you get on this stuff all the time and you're right about it. They should have been marketing this alongside that Ultra Boost, just like when they did the SL Loop in 2014, 2015, it was in the colorway of the 72 and
Yep.
all the marketing had the SL72 beside the SL loop.
Yep.
That's brilliant to me.
Yep.
That's brilliant. That's what should be done.
Yeah. And with the 8,000, I got to give a lot of credit to the team at Adidas for that whole series when they did the AZX all the way through, right? Like, for people that weren't around, that was like essentially a boutique with a letter for every letter in the alphabet got a collaboration. And so I think a few of them. I definitely got the Undefeated years later because it was like bright orange, and like orange is just my favorite color. But like that was such a cool, like the word that comes to mind is commitment to sneaker culture. Like, I do think that the 8,000 is one of my favorites. I've probably got a dozen pair of various colorways through the years, because through the years, they've done a lot of really interesting retro stuff, like stuff that doesn't make sense early on, right? Like I've got a full leather pair. They did, like various colorways that I picked up. They did a version that was, I can't remember the term that they used for it, but essentially like instead of the stitching, it was almost like how Nike had Hyperfuse at the time. Yep. So there's an 8,000 like that I have, a couple of those actually. And I just thought it was such an interesting, I mean, it's like a super comfortable shoe to wear casually too, which is like the main reason why, like I think I gravitated toward it originally, but it's just so cool that they did that, like kind of that level of commitment to, including all these different boutiques, letting them tell a color story through that shoe. Because so many times that doesn't happen. And Adidas has done really good with that. Like they did that with the 35th anniversary of the Superstars and, like a lot of different elements. And even bringing that back, this is where my like critique comes in, is like not enough people got to know the story of the 30 pairs, this time around. That shoe is so beautiful. It pops so nicely. Like if you walked into it, even if you didn't know that shoe existed and you walk into a boutique and saw that bright yellow on the wall, you're going to go towards it because it stands out so much on the wall. But like, I was bummed that they didn't, I don't expect them to like re-release all those shoes, but like I was bummed that there wasn't some more marketing to get people excited about where they came from to get to that shoe, because
for sure
that was kind of like this is not a sneaker term, it's more of a baseball card or collector's thing. It's like that was the chase shoe of that first run.
Exactly.
And like, people were diehard collecting all of those shoes throughout that. And it wasn't all 8,000s, right? Like they did.
Yeah, they did different
500s with people. Yeah, like everybody got to do kind of what they chose. But like, it was such a cool moment. And one thing that I was thinking about, like, as we're talking, the Ultra Boost is kind of like the Osagas, right? Like you putting them on and feeling that. The Ultra Boost is like still had that had like a mainstream appeal because of that. And the other shoe that comes to mind when I think about that, because I think I'm obviously biased because I can't look at shoes and not have nostalgia driving my feelings towards them.
For sure.
Because at the end of the day, like putting on a pair of Jordans or even like an Air Max 90 or something like that, those shoes are not comfortable by like today's standards.
Right.
Robbie and I just were talking about some of the basketball releases for All-Star Weekend. And I just said, I haven't worn a pair of Jordans without like move insoles in them, because like the shoes are just not comfortable to me anymore. I love the look of them, but like without that like extra cushioning, that like extra like heel cup in there, it doesn't like, it just feels so much different with that's only slightly modernizing those shoes. But the Ultra Boost, kind of what you were saying about the Osagas. The other shoe that comes to mind was like when the Jordan 28 came out, I was playing pretty regularly, and that shoe had that flight plate thing where they moved the zoom below the carbon.
Yep.
And like, it sounds crazy when you think about how simple of a choice that is, but like you can look at that, like we can look at so many shoes where literally, and Aaron Cooper talks about this, but like the millimeters that matter, like the difference in the average person feeling, like truly feeling a wow factor of putting on a shoe versus just putting on a shoe. You know, it could be the compression of that boost. It could be the double density foam. It could be flipping the zoom from the top of the plate to the bottom of the plate. All those tiny, literally millimeter changes can just flip everything that people experience with a sneaker, which is so fascinating to think about, and cool to hear you talk about the 8,000 too, because the 8,000 was like my first pair of Adidas running shoes was a 500. And it was basically USC colors, kind of probably got it in like maybe it was a retro version. So it probably was like in the mid 90s.
Okay.
I want to say maybe late 90s, because I want to say it was like right around high school for me. But like those shoes, to your point, you know, like about the SL72, as just like a chill after recovery shoe, any of those Adidas running shoes are like so good. Like there's very few that are not like just like slide them on, comfortable, nothing crazy. But it is really cool to see the trajectory of all the technologies coming together and being like, you know, like, because we get to see plenty of that with the Nike stuff. I don't think people really understand the levels and the nuance to the Adidas journey to get to that, like 8,000 being like, there's like such a wow factor of that shoe when you really see how long they went and like growing towards it and bringing in each little piece and like updating and, you know, kind of like continuing to like bring in all the different, you know, like torsion, for instance, not being on like the earliest stuff, but then coming in and it's like all that kind of stuff is such a real, it just, I'm nerding out right now, but like that's the stuff I love about this.
You're speaking my language. But yeah, I mean, especially when you say torsion, when that ZX 1000, I try to think back, what did that feel like? I mean, because elite runners, they knew, right? It was very clear they were feeling something different. There were tests before that, you know, Reebok tested putting carbon in midsoles. There were a few companies who tried. I know even Adidas, I think they were one of the earlier ones in the 80s to try putting a carbon plate. They just didn't know what they were doing with it. They were creating a bridge, right?
Yeah.
Which you see in some of the retros that have been released. You know, when the actual torsion system came out with Adidas, I can't, like, what, you knew your foot was doing something different, right? Because it wasn't just, it's not for stability. The torsion is there so that you don't roll an ankle or something. That must have been wild. These shoes, I could go crazy forever about them. Now a lot of that stuff, they're peeling away because they found other ways to do that with like in the midsole or something else, which another one that
nice
that I brought to kind of tie everything together, right? So the upper is from the Harmony from 2000, right? And then they're tying it together because they call it the Adistar Harmony, but it's like, but where's the Adistar? Well, the Adistar still exists, right? It's disappeared for years here and there, but that series continues. And the midsole on this and the outsole are from of course, from the Adistar BYD or Beyond that came out. And so when they did this last year, the Adistar Harmony, because they were two shoes, they were at the same time, they were trying to accomplish similar things, right? The cold cement construction and stuff like that. They were trying to accomplish, the two different shoes were trying to accomplish that. It just, Adistar became a series, right? They did the cushion, the control, the trail version and all those different versions of it. But again, to look at, we were just nerding out over the 8,000. Look at this and you can see all these hallmarks of the ZX and EQT series, I was so glad that you mentioned EQT because I'm with you on that. Series is, it's mind blowing the stuff that they were figuring out in the EQT series. And then that colorway is just, give me a break. I mean, that's right. But all the stuff. So the stripes, right? Because it's really obvious in these, right? the stripes are part of the loop, right? And so your foot, you're right, your foot is cinched into the shoe that way. I'm gonna knock on the again. Now it's hidden again, but it's way softer in these because they discovered other ways in the 2000s of hiding that stuff. Right in the 2000s, when Adi Zero was just about to launch in the early 2004 with Toshiaki Omori. It's an honor for me to wear Adi Zeros all the time because of that gentleman. The things that he was doing with these overlays and all this stuff, they're they're not being stitched in. And of course they stitched things in on this one, but all this stuff was, these overlays are all TPU overlays in the original Harmony, right?
Yep.
And really cool thing for them to unleash Bape on, because I think Bape's over the top aesthetic works really good on a shoe like this that's already an insane shoe. This they call it the distance drive. So instead of the torsion plate, the distance drive, where it's the entire, and it's almost like a figure 8 construction, and then they left it exposed in this, but this carbon infused nylon. So again, it's like they were figuring out things that were just ideas of the guys from the 70s, 80s, 90s.
Yep.
They were figuring out how to do it in the 2000s. This one is really cool. The 2004 Adi Star, bottom with the 2000 Harmony on top. This shoe is, it's another one of these that it's just a really cool shoe to have in hand. I run in Adi Zero shoes almost exclusively.
Okay. I was going to ask.
Yeah, so I'm really familiar with what the things are and how they work, which you can see again in my, when I write about shoes, the way I'm describing them, it's because, especially in the new Adi Zero shoes, you can see what the shoe is.
Yep.
It's funny that now they're doing the Evo SL EXO, where they're like, oh, they're putting infused overlays that you can actually see how it works. Instead of them all being on the inside of the shoe, that's why those shoes look the way they look.
Yeah.
All the technology is on the inside of the shoe. It's all hidden again. So, the Light Strike Pro on the top, again, dual density. Light Strike Pro is on the top. So top tier foam for racing. This is Repetitor 2.0 on the bottom. So that's state-of-the-art training, having a plate in there so you can do marathon. You could literally, in this shoe, I'm not going to do it, but in this shoe, you can safely train for marathons and effectively train for marathons in this shoe. It's in the weight of a lot of max cushion trainers. They did a really cool job of, the Adi Star Beyond being, a state-of-the-art trainer that's not Adi Zero. And then taking this from the thousands when the shoe first came about.
Yeah.
And using the Harmony, because the Harmony is before the Adi Star. It predates it by a couple of years. So doing that, to me, again, I agree with you. Like, why isn't that advertised in that way? They do this weird, I don't want to knock the people who write for the blog and the apps, but it's too vanilla. It's not nearly like just saying it's from the 2000s. Okay, so are all the Saucony, New Balance, Nike, everybody who's doing these Mesh Boy summer technical running shoes. Yeah, they're all from that era. If you talk about the Harmony, now you're being more specific. It's from 2000. So really, this is at the very genesis of this type of shoe. It's at the very genesis. And then even tying, and I try to do it in my writing where I tie the Adi Star series, right, is tied to, it's an extension of the ZX, which is really a series, right?
Yeah.
And the SL72, the SL, even though it's not referred to as a series, it is. While Adi Dassler was alive, he did the 72, of course. He did the 76. He was already working on the 80 that ended up being released post-mortem. There was a Mysterious that was dug out of somewhere. The Spezial group found this, and Size found this 82, an SL 82. I
I
didn't
don't
know
know
it
if I saw
existed.
that.
Yeah, I never knew it existed, but they found this, and it started to inform other shoes that
Yeah.
are coming out now. Now they can see where the SL series is going to go. They did the CP Company SL 83 Spezial as part of the anniversary, right? And to me, that was the fact that at first I was questioning Gary Aspen, and I jumped online and I was, why would you do this? Like, I'm such a fan of this series. Didn't it feel weird there's no, it's not an Olympic year. 83 is not an Olympic year, and yada, yada. I went into all this. I
Yeah.
really nerded out on him. And he went back, yeah, but Adidas throughout its history did things that don't make sense, that broke the rules, even their own rules, their internal rules, right?
Yeah.
And he went
Interesting.
into a little bit. He saved why it's 83. He didn't share that. But he went into other stuff, and I was, dude, you sold me on the shoe. I must have that as part
Yeah.
of my SL collection. I must have that shoe now. There's no
Yeah.
way I'm not gonna have that. And I'm calling it a collection now. I always refer to it as my shoe arsenal or my my rotation, because I wear everything that I buy. I don't let
Yeah.
anything sit. And then if it's special, yeah, one day I'll retire it when it's unwearable. But until that day comes, every one of them is going to fit into a rotation. So I have to sell away or barter away if I want to add something else in.
Yeah.
So that's a rule that I've made for myself.
It's been a rule for me for a couple of years now too, because I've just needed to downsize. And it's so, before I talk about that, one thing that you mentioned, like the copywriting, I was talking to Pete Forrester, who's done a bunch of work for Complex and Soul Collector and Esquire, and like he's really well versed in a lot of this stuff. And he brought up something that was really kind of interesting, not specifically about like copywriting for shoes, but in our conversation, he kind of was saying that, like, when you think about the way, like, let's say leadership looks at like words on a website or words on an advertisement or a sheet of paper or whatever that is, they're not looking at the actual words and what information you're passing along through that brick of copy. They're just looking at the brick of copy and thinking, well, we need that brick of copy for each release, right?
Yeah.
Like with each new product that comes out, we need this brick of copy, and it doesn't necessarily matter what goes in there. And I, like, I would hope that it does to a certain extent, but I know that I've been on the other side of that, where the limitations of what we can fit into the box where the words go never allows for as much detail as is needed.
Yeah.
And that's an interesting, I think, aspect of what you do with your blog and what I'm trying to do, like from more of a marketing business perspective with the sneaker newsletter, right? It's like, I know that there are more people out there that crave real information around these products, the names, the stories, the places, the people, the technologies that, that all of them weave stories. All of these things are so, like, not just literally woven together on a sneaker, but like throughout the history of all these things. Yeah. There's so much depth to every little choice that's made, even if it doesn't seem like it happened. And maybe even the person that designed a shoe today might not even have to think about where that decision came from, because it's a part of what was handed to them to say, do the next version. But like, there's so much of that. And like, credit to you for like going down these, kind of paths to connect all of these things through your blog, because that's the hardest part about, like, I think for me, as someone who started writing about sneakers just because I loved sneakers, and then I had an opportunity to share like the first story that I wrote about sneakers and ended up getting a job writing about sneakers. Like, I didn't have a place to put that story originally. It wasn't like I was just writing it because I was like, this is why I got into sneakers. I just wanted to put it down and have a place to like kind of remember it for myself. But then, like, as I've gone through my career path in this, it's like the things that make it important to me are not always the things that are important commercially. And that's always been a fight for me to internally. I'm always like battling with myself. I have to have those conversations with, whether it's a copywriter or an executive, there's some balance that you got to get to with it, which, if I'm being completely selfish and personal about it, is always disappointing. 100% always disappointing, because there's always more to the story for me. And that's what I love about your blog. And that's like, this conversation's been so awesome for me, because like these are the types of things that like, I think we're also circling back around as a society. And it's like, we're getting to the point where like, yeah, we probably should have, appreciated the people that did these in-depth things on their blogs years ago, but now they've been erased and we've moved on. And like half the sneaker blogs are no longer sneaker blogs, because we got to this point where it was like, everything had to be about a buy it now button. And ultimately that doesn't really matter to those of us that really care about this stuff, which is really interesting. So one question I was going to ask you, and I know we've been going for a while, so if we got to wrap, just let me know. But like, the thing that's interesting about the Bape shoe, we're like seeing another like big wave of running, right? Like there's so many people getting into running, and I haven't been running. It's been a few years since I ran regularly, and I'm like, it's like on my to-do list to get back out and get back to it. But what I think is really fascinating, and I was trying to think of like, when I saw that Bape shoe originally, maybe like within the last couple of months when it first started kind of leaking and then the release and stuff, I was trying to think of like the first time I saw a, like, let's say streetwear boutique collaboration on like a performance running shoe, because usually those worlds, they, the brands will try it, right? They'll give you an 8,000 if you make a new model in your cool, boutique. It sounds weird, but for those that are listening or watching, the brand always looks at the collaborator as like the cool person, the cool voice, the stamp of approval for this, model or whatever. And sometimes it's 100% the case. Other times, it's a stamp of approval for a very niche market. And it doesn't really matter if they sell a bunch of shoes. It's just to like acknowledge that they're doing something cool in this, city or town or whatever. But then I look at that Bape shoe and think like, is this Adidas getting really lucky connecting all of these things all at the same time? Or was this planned? Because right now running is so prominent in, especially on Substack, but like just in social in general. And I know that just as humans, we're all like craving community, right? Like we haven't really, I don't think most of us have really mentally recovered from COVID. We've got all this craziness going on in America with politics. Like you can't go and buy a pair of shoes at a store the way you used to. Yet we're still like, we still haven't stopped and acknowledged that maybe the aspect of things and consuming that we actually need is that community, is that going into the store and seeing somebody that can relate to the wow factor of what you see on the wall or putting something on. And like that Bape shoe to me just like stood out so much, because it's almost like the perfect storm of like you said, it's like, it's got nostalgia on top, it's modern on the bottom, it's got the trainer aspect to it. It's a Bape collab,
right?
Like it's like this like weird, like in an awesome way, like conglomerate of things that exist in different places in so much of the sneaker world. And like, I don't know, it's just like crazy to see that. And I wonder, are we going to see more of that, you think? Because we're getting so much, we're getting these like, everything has cycles, right? People will be in a running for 3-4 years, and then it'll be like another thing comes along, and everybody's, CrossFit has been that for the last 5-10 years. Cycling has had its moments in the last 5 or 6 years too. So like, I wonder what you think about it as someone who kind of lives in both those worlds.
Sure. Yeah. For me, there is some plan to it. I think sometimes, speaking specifically to Adidas, I think a lot of times they are trying something and they kind of soft roll it. And it's a little bit of kind of like what you've written about in the newsletter. It's a little bit of like not a full commitment, as much commitment as there are to the people involved. So a few years ago, they did with this running team that they all train together. They're all world-class runners called the Tin Men. Do you remember they did a
Yeah.
collab a couple years ago at the Adizero range? And it just so happened they chose these guys who were all the entire team was willing to run in them from all over the country when they finally perfected the Adizero range. So the Adizero range was struggling with how to go from boost to whatever the new technology would be, right? That was a big struggle. I lived through it. I was getting shoes that maybe were lighter than I needed them to be, getting race shoes because there was the right amount of boost where they weren't making them heavy. So
Yeah.
Adidas, they were trying this for I think they had the idea to use, or for lack of better words, to partner with something, a running team or a boutique, someone that they could catch lightning in a bottle and have running be cool at the same time as they had state of the art product.
Yeah.
You know, kind of like what happened with Ultra Boost. It just so happened with Energy Boost right before that for sure. But Energy Boost, Ultra Boost, Pure Boost, it just so happened that things worked out the way they worked.
Yeah.
They were not working on that. I mean, you know, the first below 2.5 hour marathon was written in an adios shoe. You know what I mean? So it's
Yeah.
not like
Yeah.
it's not as though they were working on this thing that ended up happening with the Tin Men. The Tin Men was very deliberate. That was very deliberate. What they had is I think it was 2 or 3 different release groups of shoes in the Tin Men colorways. So this running group got to have feedback on how
Yeah.
these shoes were going to look. And then they even had the Tin Men logo on them. I had a
Yeah.
pair of the Takumi Sens of that. So
And
that for sure,
they
I
did
think
like
that would be. Mhm.
they did like if I remember right, they did like I forget the model, but they did like the full on performance shoe, and then they did like a retro like something, right?
They ended up doing something was retro-y
Yeah.
as part of that. And so I feel like they had the idea to make something. I do think they just struggled with how to do that. Like, we're not attaching it to an Olympic cycle. We're not attaching it, that is more like for all the brands when they're doing running,
Yeah. Yeah.
everything comes out right just before, in February, mid to late February, it comes out, starts to drop early March, just at the beginning of running season for everyone. So they didn't have like all that stuff. They didn't have an Olympics though, where it would make sense. They could budget bigger for that, right?
Yep.
So
Yep.
when this thing with the Tin Men come, feel like that was the genesis of this thing. With Bape now. Now they don't need a running group because Adizero has had 6 years of making top tier running shoes that help, their podium, like they're on podiums like
Yeah.
crazy now. They don't have to do that. Now they can take a boutique, like the idea of the consortium idea, and they can do that with boutiques. I want them to do it with more boutiques because this hybrid came about, if you remember, with End.
Yeah.
End Clothing is the one that helped design this thing.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I think I think that they always have like little things going, but I think you make an important point there too with like the 10-man stuff is like the company is not, the team that's putting it together is not going to get a lot of money for the smaller things when they know there's a massive pool of money. Let's say, 2 years from now not 2 years from now, but every Olympic cycle, there is a big pot of money that goes towards running shoes for all these brands. Yeah, that's really interesting because now I'm thinking of like, Nike does probably a little more of that, dipping into the like streetwear, boutique kind of side with their, like what they would call performance running shoes.
Yep.
But it's also usually a part of some other bigger story or something that they kind of always have on the side. And it seems like there's just not as, and maybe I'm just not like paying attention to it. It seems like Adidas has not had the consistency running parallel with, you know, performance and retro product the way that Nike has.
I think just in general, you know, along those lines, right? I think Nike just in general does a better job at the marketing piece.
Yeah.
Nike is so good at that. You know, I wrote a story about, you know, just, you know, kind of like urban myths about certain Nike models, and then kind of told, here's the actual history behind that model or whatever the urban myth is about that model, right? Nike's so, they're better than anyone at it. They really are. I think, especially mass marketing that way, they're way better. And so, yeah, there has to be this pool that's always there, you know, kind of like a reserve shoot or something like that.
Yeah.
If they latch onto something where they can, you know, they can dip into pool X and get that. Cause I mean, they've always been so good on the marketing side. So good.
I am always saying that in the newsletter because, you know, I'm most critical of Nike because they are the best. They've, you know, they're the ones that I don't know if what we consider sneaker culture exists if you don't have the marketing, you know, even Wieden and Kennedy behind Nike. If we don't have that, I don't know if the rest of the brands get it to the level that it became. And then, like, for me, I'm like, well, I'm just thankful because I've been able to earn a living doing stuff within this world for, you know, 15, 20 years. But it is really interesting to think about, like, just how consistent Nike has been with it. Like, I think everybody has a brand preference, even a product preference.
Yeah.
Some people are going to, like, they're going to love wearing Adidas, whether that's the right shoe for them or the wrong, you know, even on a running side, right? Because I see it now, right, where I'm seeing, like, you know, the stuff they've been doing with ACG recently is really cool. Like, really, like, in your face, kind of the stuff that I love about Nike marketing with this ACG campaign. And I'm seeing a bunch of, like, running groups talking about ACG stuff. Well, to the best of my knowledge, there's no modern performance running shoes coming from ACG. That's a retro line for Nike.
Right.
Like, they don't look at it as the same. But now I'm seeing these people get excited about it, and I'm thinking, like, this is, like, circling back to the Bape collab. Like, I feel like we're in this world where we're going to start seeing a lot more interesting collaborations on modern running shoes, which I think is super cool. Like, I think, you know, I get that it's experimental when you don't have, like, the fan base behind a new product, and it's a bigger risk for these brands to, you know, put a bunch of money behind a model that is not proven. But it's also super exciting to, like, see those things happening and starting to bubble up, because now you can start to see how sneaker culture, I'm not one to say that sneaker culture is dead necessarily, but, like, I can see how it comes back at this point, right? Because
for sure.
Here's the weird nuanced excitement from all these different places coming together. And we might not care about the same things we did 5-10 years ago, but, like, there's going to be a new group of people that elevate it and keep it going for the next generation.
Well, look at what Salehi did, right, with the SB Vellum at Puma. I mean, if that is Harold, right, calling out in the distance, I mean, I think he did an amazing job with it too, because it's in the DNA of what Puma's doing now. And Puma does, I feel like they do really smart collaborations. They're not cookie cutter, like even their in-house We Are Legends thing that they now partner with the Schomburg Center. You know, that stuff, who would think of that? Well, they did it, right? The Puma team did. And certainly when you look at the history, going back into the history nerd stuff, that's what Rudy Dassler took with him when the Dasslers split up, right? All the engineers and cobblers went with Adi, and all the business and marketing guys went with Rudy. And when you look at what the two lack, right? Puma now they're really coming into their own now with their performance gear, like they're coming back around. Yeah. But they were always making a product that was successful at Adidas. If you look, like, in the 70s, 80s and that, it always seemed to be a bit of that. Even like the Palermo they
Yeah.
couldn't stand the fact that in the terraces, they were all wearing Sambas and Gazelles, and if you look at the Palermo, it looks like a Samba, right? It kind of
Yep.
looks like a
Yep.
Samba. I love that model, by the way.
Yeah.
But, you look at this stuff and yeah, it makes sense. So I definitely think that SB Vellum, that is a herald in the distance. I think, and doing this, Adidas doing this model out of existing models and trusting a boutique like that. And
Yeah.
then earlier in the year, they did the red snapper version
Yeah,
with
yeah.
Sneaker Politics.
Yep.
So that's, that, I guess
That's
that
cool.
answers your question. If you look
Yeah.
at Salehi and then you look at and being entrusted to do this, I don't know, but I don't think there are engineers, especially running engineers at End.
Oh,
The
yeah,
fact
I
that
would
they were
doubt it. Yeah.
trusted to work with
Yep.
the Adidas team, the Herzl team, to do this, that's incredible. And I think that's cool, and more of that needs to happen. And I do think, even to your point about the copy, the brand's gotta. I get, like, I know a lot of that they leave to the collaborators,
Yeah.
but this stuff like that we're talking about, the brand's gotta. I feel like they gotta do more of the heavy lifting on that in some way, shape, or form. I know Puma has a blog where they kind of describe histories and stuff like that. That's kind of cool, but I just feel like not enough of it. I get my beak wet, but not enough at it. Going back to when I started the blog, I befriended, developed a friendship with Daniel Montoya Jr., who is the shoe mulier. And it was because I was always posting these long, super long, a blog story for comments on shoes about the history of that shoe. Whenever I'd hear, oh, this collaborator invented it, aren't they so smart? Well, actually, no. That shoe is this shoe, especially like Yeezy with the feet you wear
Yeah. Yep.
and
Yep.
T stuff. I would always comment on that stuff. No, it's this, and the Ultra Boost linking it to the ZX series and that. And so we developed a friendship out of that. I even co-wrote some stuff with him for his for his podcast that he had for a while, and you develop these friendships, and then he started asking me about actual performance shoes, before
Yeah.
he'd buy them.
Yep.
Hey, I trust you, what do you think about this and that? And I noticed, yeah, that out of that, a true friendship develops out of this, like you were talking about earlier, with this common interest. Even with the Kicking It crew,
Yeah.
with their boutiques, they're amazing. That collab, that Gazelle, because I was going to bring that, the Gazelle indoor
Yeah.
collab they did, I think was amazing. Those boutique collabs are really nice. And yeah, I think even those have to be pumped more by the brands too, right? I get
Totally. Yeah.
why the boutiques are doing the heavy lifting there, but man, they have if you're going to talk about limited space and limited budgets, right? I mean, those boutiques doing that on their own. So I definitely want to do more writing on that. I didn't write on the End thing with this, but I am going to be doing it because we're actually working a story about this one.
Yeah.
And has to be credited with the shoe being in existence at all. And then for sure, I think hype behind it really started with the red snapper that Sneaker Politics did.
Yeah, and the Sneaker Politics, Derek and the team there, like they take such beautiful photos, man. Like,
yep.
It's like I've taken pictures of sneakers for 20 some years, and I'm like not the greatest photographer, but when I set everything up and take pictures, like I can do okay. Like I can feel good about what I've taken pictures of, right? The photos that I put out there. But that team and like the storytelling behind all of their photography and like it's just always so consistently wow to me. Like it just like that shoe was one of them where I was just like, this thing is beautiful. Like I don't even need to be into sneakers, I don't think, but I'm just looking at it thinking, this is beautiful. Like,
yep.
And I think that's, kind of to your point about like the Kicking It shoe and like the support from the brand. And, you know, I want to like wrap up by talking about the Bad Bunny stuff, obviously, but like, I obviously have a personal connection to Greg Grovey, who started Kicking It. So like, I feel like he is one of those people that has put in so much work for his community, for sneakers, for, like, to me, that is the biggest reason why that shoe is so special. Then like the fact that like I lived in Austin for a few years, like, the story behind Austin being the music capital, like all of these perfect things come together. Yeah. And like, I don't look at, people will look at a shoe and say, oh, the color's not for me. And I totally understand that. But like guys like you and I are way more invested in these things than just what colors end up on the shoe. Of course, like we might prefer a particular color or something, have favorites. But when I saw that shoe, I was like, this is like, it's bright, it's vibrant, it's perfect for what I think of when I think of Austin. And then having Greg get to be the one and his team be the one that kind of bring that together. And like, you're spot on. Like that was an example. Even I think to some extent, the politics shoe, like both of those, I just felt like, can we get a little more love for the small guy in this partnership? I understand that, all these big brands have limited space to repost and, collaborate on posts on Instagram. Like, and I understand that they all have different teams also looking at that. And there's, Adidas is probably 50 different categories of people all asking one social media team, like, hey, when can we get our thing posted? Because that's how it worked for us when we were at Complex back in the day, and then,
oh, wow. Okay.
So like you have like, if you want, so I signed up for Complex sneakers accounts when I was there. So like when we did that, in order to grow those accounts, we wanted to get on the main Complex account. So but this is before there was collaboration on Instagram. So basically you just wanted the main account to post and tag Complex sneakers so we could continue to grow our account. Right.
Yep.
And so like that probably still happens at a lot of the big companies that have these kind of like segmented audiences. Okay. And especially with footwear, right? Like, if you're selling a $300 shoe, that's going to be prioritized over, the $50 t-shirt. But like, you're all a part of Adidas, but you're all fighting for that like promotion, basically.
Yep.
And that's kind of what, to get into the Bad Bunny stuff, that's kind of where I was coming from with that story, because I was just like, I know it's got to be hard for these brands to do this stuff. I know it's got to be, I know that like if you're, one of the collaborators, like a small place like Kicking It or Politics, although, relative to maybe my local sneaker store here, they're big time, like they've got collaborations where like the stores around here are just local stores and you usually don't see much even like in the form of lifestyle shoes there. It's like, you've got like a couple of little running stores and like that's kind of their lane. But then like with the Bad Bunny thing, I had seen him before do, and so many like artists do this now where they like wipe their page clean after like after the album, after the story's done. It's like, okay, I'm going to start over. And I love that. I love the idea that like part of me is like kind of like a little stick it to the man with it, where it's like, I'm not going to play by your game and leave all of my stuff up there. I'm going to start over, and this is a new chapter for the next story that I'm going to tell. And that's an album or a book or whatever it is for these creative people. When I saw that they had posted the stuff leading up to the Super Bowl, I was kind of just bummed that they weren't reposting about the Super. Like, obviously, it's hard to separate like the fact that most people know. Obviously, all Bad Bunny fans are going to know that he's going to perform at the Super Bowl. Football fans are going to know. It was very buzzworthy for dumb reasons too. But like at the same time, I don't remember how many millions of followers Adidas has on all their platforms, but it's like, it wouldn't be that hard when you're not posting to post about it, And I know like I'm maybe a little too optimistic or hopeful, or maybe I think more human than corporate will.
Sure.
Which is also why I'm, trying to do my own thing now versus like having the job maybe. But
right.
It was just really interesting because even you bringing up the kicking it thing and the politics stuff, like those are other examples of where like, I wish I would have seen this elevated, a shop with 30 or 40,000 followers getting posted to tens of millions is massive. It might not have the same effect with the Bad Bunny performance, but I'm sure that there's some crossover there that
for sure
it doesn't hurt to just get that message out there further. Because knowing his music, knowing him as a fan, I knew it was going to be amazing. So it was like, and like,
absolutely.
I don't want to go too far down the politics aspect of this, but like I kind of stopped watching football after the Kaepernick thing happened. I'm a 49er fan. Like I'll get looped into games occasionally, or like, well, I want to see my neighbors, my community, my friends and family that love the team happy. So like I didn't watch for like a handful of years at all. And then it was kind of like, okay, like, well, we're going to, like we just are around each other. We're seeing it. And it's like, I'm not trying to be like a stick in the mud with it, let's say.
Right.
But then like, with the Kendrick performance last year, I'm like a huge hip hop fan. And like I got to work with Kendrick when he got his first Reebok deal. So like, I'm a diehard fan. Like I am, as the internet would say, I'm a stan. Like Kendrick is like, up there for me in terms of like the top 5 of, but like knowing that Kendrick did that, seeing that Bad Bunny and like knowing the conflict that was building going into it, or, maybe it's not even building conflict. It's just the frustration that I think many of us are feeling going into it. I was just so put off when I looked at Adidas and didn't see anything. And like you had some really interesting thoughts, and I wanted to, like, part of why I wanted to talk to you is so you could share that with the audience that I have here. But it was just such an interesting feeling to, like, I'm sitting on the couch watching this performance. I've got goosebumps. My girl is tearing up. Like, we were all just feeling it, It was just like, this is what it's about, And then to come out with all the flags, and it's like, right? Intense. Even more so than me, probably, right?
Intense.
But like, it was like, maybe for me coming off of that high of experiencing it and then looking and seeing like, oh man, it was a week ago the last time they talked about him,
Right.
Damn.
Yeah, because there was they had started the ad campaign for the Bad Boy 1.0, right? Yeah. And then it just dropped off like 6 days before the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Yeah, for me, and I even commented to you this way, I understand the want for the more, but, you and I, we also share that we're fans of Calle 13. That's 13th Street for people who don't speak Spanish. Again, not trying to get too political, but people don't understand. Residente got really big, right? I mean, he's a worldwide, global icon now. But I think probably in his film career, he may be he may end up even more renowned because of the work he's already doing. He was Calle 13, his band, from all U.S. Airways, which included in Puerto Rico, right, where he's born and raised there and lived there at the time. So they couldn't get any radio play. I think there was one stadium on the entire island that would let them play there. And on his last tour, he actually went back and played at that stadium. When he played Puerto Rico, he played at that stadium.
Awesome.
So, there's this history. Adidas came along at that time when they weren't making money because they couldn't play. We couldn't get any airplay. Adidas came along and signed them. There was a lot of backlash almost immediately. Oh, this company's coming along and they're taking advantage of this little Puerto Rican group that can't get played in Puerto Rico. And there was a lot of backlash, and even years later, like in diss tracks, Latin rapper diss tracks, where they would talk about him being used by Adidas, where he did a response where I'm not being used by Adidas, I'm using Adidas.
Yeah.
Nice little double entendre he
Yep.
did there. But, I wonder if that doesn't have some, because, Bad Bunny, for people who don't know, he's kind of like a disciple, or he was mentored to some degree, and he's a very close friend with Residente. And the two of them traveled back to Puerto Rico. Bad Bunny canceled his European tour to go back to Puerto Rico, right, to for that uprising against Rosselló, the governor, on 2019, whatever it was. That's when I started paying attention to Bad Bunny, was because of that. So it was through Residente Calle 13 that I was like, okay, I know this guy's done tracks here and there that I like, but I didn't know this guy had this in him. Right, because then they did the song Afilando los Cuchillos, Sharpening the Knives. They did that and some other things, and I was like, oh, this dude must be solid, right? If Residente is working with him like this, because he's so picky about his partnerships, and certainly hadn't done anything with someone from the generation after him.
Yeah.
So that was cool. But I always wondered if, does that have something to do with it? Because they've partnered with him on virtually everything he's done since they signed him in 2022. And even like we mentioned with the F1 team, they made him part of the F1 team, the ownership. And then doing the time trials there, which had never been done before. I don't know if it were done anywhere in the Caribbean. I know they weren't done there, though, in Puerto Rico. And all that other, with the art museum, which is a world-renowned art museum, they did a whole section that was all the Bad Bunny shoes, including all the samples and everything that had ever been done. So I can understand, wow, why didn't they advertise or push more? Well, the World Cup is this year, this summer. And Adidas is the main sponsor of the World Cup. And they're going to have games in the U.S. And, because I even contacted Bjorn Golden about it, because I'd seen a photo that I was not a fan of. Someone took a photo op with him, and I wasn't a fan of that particular photo on his timeline. And I wrote to him a little bit about that, just please be more careful and more sensitive. There are some of your fans that's not going to be okay with. I'm one of them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I wonder if, they have to, because it came to a fever pitch, I wonder, did they have stuff prepared, but then they held it back or were asked to hold back? Because I can imagine Bad Bunny doing that. Like, don't get in this. It's become something else. It's become something else. I was happy to see all the Bad Bunny sneakers on the entire cast that was in the Super Bowl and stuff like that. But I wondered if it wasn't some of that, because even they changed. I think now they've done the third branding change with him, right? They had the original one with the Bad Bunny logo.
Yep.
That was just Adidas Bad Bunny. Then they did, and this is what, a year or two old only, the Adidas / and then Para Bad Bunny, right? And now they've done this Adidas / and this new logo that he's created for himself with the Bad Bull. And I'm like, that's a lot of money, unnecessary spending. So in my mind, I can't imagine why they wouldn't have, because they could recoup that. To your point, you can probably recoup some of that by doing this thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
By backing or promoting your relationship with Bad Bunny more, because all this other unnecessary spending you're doing for copywriting with him and trademarking with him, right? And so, it was strange to me. To be honest with you, I was too caught up in what Bad Bunny was doing.
The beauty of the
to me, that was bigger than, Pharrell. And no, I'm not dissing you, Pharrell, if you watch this, but he has a brand called Human Race. And Bad Bunny took a stand for the human race. Right? When he did this, Together We're America, Spikes the Ball, and you brought up the, bringing out of all the flags, including U.S., Canada, Mexico, and then all these other, the Caribbean, all the Caribbean flags were there. So you didn't have to be Latino. They weren't expecting everyone to speak Spanish. It was all the Caribbean flags. It was all the North American flags. all the South American flags. Together we are America. That's so powerful. I was so caught up in that. But yeah, I was texting, one of my Latino buddies, actually the shoe Molier, Daniel. We were writing back and forth, how emotional we were, and then he writes, "And all those Bad Bunny sneakers," And
Yeah.
so I wondered, is it just going to be, the hardcore sneaker people, or, I know for me, I see a lot more Latinos here in the U.S. wearing Adidas, who were usually they were wearing Nike. And I can't help but think some of that has to do with that relationship, So yeah, I guess maybe I just made an argument on both sides of it, on what, your take on it, but then also on my take that, I think the moment had to be about the message,
Yeah.
not about the relationship. So that was my take. And when I commented on your story, that's what I was getting at. The message is what's important. I don't want it to be tainted, because Bad Bunny has already been receiving some negativity from, I'm just going to say, their haters who are Latino, who have said, "Oh yeah, this guy, he doesn't believe any of the stuff he's talking about." This was just before the Super Bowl halftime show. He doesn't believe any of this stuff. He's in it for the money. And I'm like, that's exactly what he's doing, is the antithesis of that. If he
Yeah.
was only doing it for the money, how is he going to ever play in the U.S. again
Right.
doing
Yeah.
what he did?
Yeah.
How's he ever going to, talking about, tariffs, everyone knows he's signed to Adidas,
Yeah.
and that's a foreign brand.
Yeah, and to take that
what I
risk
mean?
as an individual, right? Like is so admirable, right? Like this
Crazy.
It just, I don't know. I don't understand how people can't see through that, but also like clearly people can't see half the things that are right in front of them right now. So
Yeah, for sure.
I do totally, from a moment perspective, like I wasn't wanting Adidas to be involved in it any more than they were.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I just felt like, man, like some go watch or something. And part of that, I don't know if I put this in the story, or if maybe I said it in response to your comment, but part of that is because they've been so diehard behind him in so many different ways.
Yeah.
Part of it was just like, it just felt out of place when I looked.
Yeah.
And
That's
thankfully I
point.
didn't look at it before the actual, performance, because it would have just been weird. But like and again, it could have been just coming off of the high of enjoying it and seeing, that they didn't. It's so crazy to me too. Like, I mean, it's just crazy that we even have to think about the implications of all this stuff.
Agreed.
Right? But it's like,
Agreed.
I've grown up in such different neighborhoods and moved so much that like, I just am so lucky to have been exposed to people not like me. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And like, even, like my girlfriend, and I were talking about this, about the Bad Bunny stuff, but we talked about it with Kendrick, and like the fact that like, it's beautiful that we're like giving people the stage to speak about the wrongs that have been going on in this country for all of our lives, for all of its existence, right? And probably beyond America's existence anyway, right? Like money corrupts, and it's always been a very constant thing in humanity's lives, right? But like, it's so cool to see the Bad Bunny performance. The like, I got super emotional about it. I felt this very similar with the Kendrick performance the year before.
Yep.
And even going back a little bit before that, like, seeing my girlfriend's response to Kamala Harris, becoming vice president and having the opportunity to be president, like getting to see, this is something that like, maybe it's too political for sneaker talk, but it's so weird to me that people see someone that looks slightly different than them and feels like they're not getting an opportunity because of that person. When like, I think at this point, we should just go through every Super Bowl, should have a more nuanced, a more, like, let's just make sure that everybody gets the chance to stand up and
For sure.
show themselves and their people to the world. And
Yeah.
yet, like, part of me going back to like my start of this conversation about like why I stopped watching the NFL, it's like the NFL is also like the part of the biggest problem in all of this for so long. And I'm just like, what is going on? But anyway, I think
The fact that
Bad
the
Bunny,
opportunities are there to
Yeah.
me is the big thing, right? And to your point, yes, I agree. There should be, uh, an Asian star performs, because especially now, right, with K-pop and everything, you could see that happening very easily.
yeah,
But
yeah.
I think that because that's all the American story, right? And I think there have been quite a few people who have said it even more eloquently. But all of our stories are the American story, right? And it same goes in Europe. All the, throughout the, all the ethnic groups that have migrated to certain countries throughout the history of that country, they're all the history of, whether it's Slovenia, Germany, the UK, whatever. All those people are the story of that country. There's no such thing as it's one bloodline or what have you that is the history of it. Just like
Yep.
this thing right here, right? Right, just like this thing right here. We went through an entire decade, and we could have gone back even further to get to this shoe. That this shoe tells the story of all that, and then this shoe does the same, right? To everything before 2000. So I think, we had, in an odd way, sneakers is definitely doing it better than anybody else is doing it in a more succinct way. And maybe that's why people like you and me and your listeners and people who read the blog and people we've befriended throughout the years, that's what it is. Our tribe isn't a tribe of a political group or a this or a that. The tribe that we've culminated, and that's why I really cling to that community thing, especially the COM for communication and unity, all caps, is it's a tribe. But it's a broad tribe. I mean, I had someone from Mexico writing me about this one, how bad he wanted it, from Golden Choink. And, I mean, there's, I love what sneakers has brought me, with the comics, when I was writing the comic blogs and self-publishing. Then when I did the same thing with the car club thing, community was always at the center of what I'm doing. And I'm so glad that, now, I'm fostering this friendship with you because, again, my community is growing. My tribe is growing. My tribe has gained a new member. And I think it's so cool that it's through things that we wear every day that in reality, they're made to protect our feet, our knees, right? Our hips, our backs. That's what they were invented to do. All these wonderful inventors created them to do, and they've connected us not just to the ground, but they've connected us to one another. I think that's awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I think that's a good spot to wrap up. It's been awesome talking to you. I too, thanks for coming on. I too feel like I've gained a tribe member myself. I know that we're gonna nerd out a lot more than we did on this conversation. So it's great to connect with you. But I guess last thing is let everybody know how they can find you, how they can connect with you outside of the show.
Sure. So thanks. I appreciate it. So as I mentioned at the blog spot, it's the official Encyclopedia Sneakérica. And then in Instagram, I go by the Sneaker Profiler. Yeah. Connect with me at either one of those places. Always looking to become a member of a new tribe and have new members join my tribe. So please have at it. If you like geeking out about this stuff, if you like nerding out about this kind of stuff, history, especially as it's related to sneakers, please join me.
Right on. I'll put the links in the description wherever you're watching or listening to this. Thanks for rocking with us. This has been a long episode, but hopefully you enjoyed it, and we'll catch you in the next one. Thanks. Peace.
Peace. Thanks.
Hey, Nick here again. Before you take off, I want to thank you for listening to the Sneaker History Podcast. If you want more insights into the sneaker world, I've started a newsletter called the Sneaker Newsletter to share my knowledge of over 2 decades experience working in the footwear industry. You can find the link below or go to thesneakernewsletter.com. Last but not least, tell someone you like their kicks today. You never know how far a simple compliment can take you, and we all know how good it feels to be on the receiving end of some appreciation. Thank you for all the support, and we will catch you on the next episode. Peace.